Yes, today, we made a trade. Terry Rozier for Kyle Lowry, and also the 27 first round pick protected. And if it doesn't convey in 27, it becomes unprotected in 28. Before I open it up to questions, I just feel I have to thank Terry. He came to Charlotte 4.5 years ago, and we spoke this morning. But he made a great impact on this organization, on the court and off the court. This morning in my call with him, he thanked us for bringing him to Charlotte, and he indicated that he grew up, on the court and off the court. He feels he became more professional and a better person. I think we all know how involved he was in the community, and of course, on the court in particular this year, he's had his best year ever. So it was a bittersweet phone call, I'll be honest. We brought him here on a sign and trade when Kemba Walker went to Boston, and there was a lot of unknown. We felt good about it, but you never know. And it turned out to be a good deal for us, and certainly, as Terry indicated, something that was very, very good for him. So thank you, Terry. Good luck. And at this time, I'll open it up to questions.
Hey, Mitch, just you mentioned earlier about Terry in the first round draft pick. Just wondering, from your perspective, the cap space potentially with Kyle Lowry in the draft pick, how does that help the franchise moving forward, do you think, beyond the season?
Yeah, Terry had, a couple of years remaining on his contract, and Kyle Lowry is an expiring contract. So, that money will be freed up. It's always good to be, flexible, financially. It will help us this summer, and of course, it'll help us, in the next couple of weeks to plan for this summer and beyond, just to know what our numbers are going to look like. And the pick itself, has incredible potential for upside. So, we don't know who that player may be, several years out down the road, but an asset that valuable can also become, something that you can put into a trade and make a deal. So, yes, the financial part of it, was a part of it, but getting, the pick was probably the most important part.
And then also, do you expect to be active still the next 2 weeks here to figure out if you can move any more players for potential assets or to bring players back?
Yeah, we will be. This is early, right? I mean, I'm sure everybody or most people on this call, weren't expecting something this far out from the trade deadline. So this is a little early. And one of the benefits of having done something early is that you've got more information now, and we can look at opportunities knowing what we've just done, right? So the trade deadline is still a week or so away, and we will continue to be active.
Obviously, with Kyle's age and being on a team that has won 10 games at this point, has he expressed any interest or told you guys that he would want to buy out, or see if you guys would want to find another trade for him, or is that something that's off the table?
Well, I spoke to Kyle this morning, and I know him a little bit. So, we chatted, and most of it was pleasantries, right? We went through the teams, that he had been on, and I think, this might be his fifth, NBA team. So it's nothing new to him. He's been around the block. Beyond that, it was not discussed, what may be down the road or what may come down the road. We just did the deal, a couple of hours ago. So we'll be in touch with his representative, and we'll go from there.
And then also to obviously, when you make a move like this, it sends kind of a signal to a lot of fans that a rebuild may be coming. Do you see it more as a rebuild, or as a kind of a retool situation?
Well, it's definitely not a rebuild. Okay. we think we've got, a foundation of players in place. Of course, I'm not going to mention all the players, but I'll mention our two highest picks, right? It just makes sense. LaMelo Ball and Brandon Miller. So, but there are other players that we've pegged as players that would be very difficult to trade. And like I said, I don't want to mention all the names, but we do feel that, and then we've got some veteran players, right, still under contract, that are still, I wouldn't, we drafted them 4 years ago, but they're not even 25 yet, right? So we do have, I think, a good group, for various reasons, most of all, right, the injury scenario this year, we weren't able to, really see what kind of team we had or reach whatever potential we thought we had. And we had hoped that we would contend for one of those lower level playoff spots, right? That was our hope. Never got a chance to put together a run. And that's not to say that, we still don't intend on trying to win games, because we do. So I wouldn't call it a rebuild. Okay, a rebuild is, in my opinion, something where you start from scratch, and you convert everything you have into draft capital, and you create gobs of cap room, and you start taking in contracts to get picks, and it could drag out years. That's not the case. I think it's more of a case of recognizing where we are this year. Going forward, just looking at our timeline, we had to be realistic. We had to be realistic as to the kind of year that Terry was having, and it's hard. It's hard to make a deal like this. When a guy has played as hard as he has on the court. Rarely does he miss a game. The kid, every time he goes in for a layup, he gets thrown to the ground, and he does a side flip or whatever and gets up and runs back down the court. It's hard to, say goodbye to a player like that. But these are hard decisions you make in professional sports. And I know it's a long-winded answer, but I think I covered a lot of bases.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I wonder two things, and they're both short, so I'll ask them together. But one is, did Terry push for this at all? We know he has a home in Miami, and perhaps this is going to be a really good situation for him. And secondly, how involved were your current owners in signing off on this / pushing for this?
Yeah, Terry never came to me and said he wanted to be traded. Truth be told, I think every veteran, as they approach 30, doesn't want to go through a season where, you're not going to have an impact in the playoffs. And I think if you asked him, he would show great remorse in leaving Charlotte, and be very nostalgic. At least he was this morning. But I think he'd also say, hey, listen, I'm getting to be 30 years old, and this is a chance for me to do something in the playoffs. Okay, so I think that's the way to answer that question. And the second part of your question is, of course.
Yes, right.
Yeah, no, of course. The new owners, Rick and Gabe, were involved. I can't do a deal like this, whether it's with, the previous owner or with these owners. They get to sign off on everything. So they were involved. And, as you might imagine, right, this is their first deal. So, a lot of energy and a lot of discussion. But yes, they were involved. At the end of the day, I get tasked with making these decisions, and they did approve it.
Thank you.
In terms of this move, I know that you'd covered kind of the reasons behind it, but you had always talked about the asset management being something that you guys wanted to be at least forefront on. And you'd also talked about the fact that you had probably been beyond building in the draft. I just wanted to know Is that still your thinking? And do you feel like these assets could be combined for a bigger move, say in the offseason or somewhere down the road?
I think the answer is yes, they can be combined. There'll have to be some assessments of this team when the season ends, and to really see where we are and how good we can be and how quickly we'll get there. As to using an asset like that and putting it in a deal and getting a veteran player, or holding on to it and drafting a player. Right now we don't know. And of course, the financial flexibility, that can apply to several, different, ways to improve a team, right? Make a trade. It's always helpful, take back assets, get picks, or in free agency. But it's too early to say right now. But I think we are, once again, we're further down the road than we would be if we were rebuilding. But I think we have a good group of young players that have experience. I think some players that have shown, even though they're very young, that their future is bright. And then I also feel we have veterans, that are on contract that are also valuable. So, we're further down the road than a rebuild, but this is clearly, a point where, we had to make a decision on where we stood just prior to the trade deadline and be realistic.
And a quick follow-up, in terms of Kyle, I know you kind of answered a little bit to him before, but I know you don't want to necessarily give up your total leverage with the deadline being on the 8th, but do you guys kind of have a mutual understanding in terms of his immediate future and I guess his longer-term future beyond the rest of the season?
Oh, I don't know. Yeah, no, I don't know. Certainly, like I said, I mean, everybody, Kyle's, quote unquote, doesn't fit the timeline of what we're trying to accomplish. Now, if he's on the team, he brings veteran leadership, and he'd be good for the locker room. So that's not to say that just because he doesn't fit the timeline, he won't be on this team. There are things he does bring to the table, but realistically, right? It's a big expiring contract, and we have another week to 10 days, whatever, to go through the trade deadline. We have to look at the opportunities, and there is going to be a possibility that maybe there's something comes up that we have to look at. So I can't discount that.
When you look at some of the reasons why you made this trade, you talk about the contract, the pick being, but how much weight and consideration was given to his on-court pairing with LaMelo? And even though they've been productive, it necessarily hasn't resulted in wins.
Yeah, I wouldn't say there's been a lot of discussion. They seem to me to have played pretty well together, right? They both had great success, and from a productivity point of view, they've both put up career numbers every year. So that wasn't really a big part of this. And sometimes even if it were, there's not much you can do about it, right? But that was not a focus, no.
This deal obviously creates some cap flexibility in the summer. There would also be opportunities maybe also to take on salaries for draft picks, which would maybe eat into that sum of flexibility in the summer. Is that something that you think could happen, or is that cap flexibility you've created a real priority for the franchise?
Yeah, that can absolutely happen.
The new CBA changed the buyout rules. Teams in the second apron cannot sign players on the buyout market. How has that changed your approach to the buyout market this season?
Yeah, I don't want to get technical. They can, but not if they're making more than the league average when they're waived, right? So that's a little technical, but your point is well taken. That not everybody that gets waived will be eligible for a buyout or go to a team. Everybody can get a buyout, but the number of teams that would be limited would be limited that player can go to. If you're, as you mentioned, once again, with the first and second apron, right? So, not so much a consideration for us. I think, representatives that have players that their veterans, they're waived and they make more than the league average. I think it may limit their options, but overall, it's going to be good for the buyout market. So I don't think there'll be a lot of pressure or as much pressure as years past on teams to agree to buyouts, right? Because the options are going to be limited that these players can go to.
I know you talked about the rebuild. You don't like to call it that at all. Would it make sense though to consider moving some of the veteran players, Gordon, Miles, that are about to become free agents? And how many guys would you consider that are just untradeable on your roster at this point?
Clearly, we've talked about players that I can't see a scenario that we would move. And beyond the players I mentioned, I think there are another 3 or 4 players, maybe even more than that we like, right? So I can't discount, the fact that, we're a team that's trying to build that can sustain something going forward and that we won't look for opportunity. And, we will do that. And we value our players, every player a little different than the player next to them. And that's something that we can keep internal, and we'll look for opportunities. And if there's something out there, we'll look to do it. It's as simple as that.
Mitch, again, sorry for these suitcase questions, but a double question here. And one is, I know you don't want to call it a rebuild. So I wonder if you had one word that you might call it instead, if there was a word that comes to mind. And secondly, I wonder, you had some good memories there of Rozier and just his sheer toughness, which I think all of us would agree on how tough he is. Yeah. And I wonder if you had one particular memory of Terry in a game or whatever in these 4.5 years where you were like, oh my gosh, that's amazing, a fond memory.
Yeah. Well, I think, I don't have anything in front of me, right? I think there was a game in Cleveland, several years ago. It was where he's from, and he just had a ridiculous game. It might be even 3 years ago. I don't remember. In terms of the one word, I don't have one word. Okay, like I said, a rebuild is when you start with a bunch of veterans and a team that's not going anywhere, and you just decide to scrap it all and start from scratch. Okay, clearly, we're down the road from that. So I don't know what the word would be, but I would not use the word rebuild, and I think you would agree we're further on down the road than that. What the word is, I don't know.
Back on Kyle for a second. So could we expect Kyle to play in a game sometime this week, or is that going to be kind of just something you guys wait to see when you guys talk again?
He's got to report. He's got to pass the physical. It's going to take a couple of days. Yeah. I can't say that's something that we would, look to accomplish right away. It may be that we wait to see what happens out of respect, right? To him and what he's accomplished in this league. Maybe we wait to see and have the trade deadline pass, and rather than have him relocate and start something that may or may not take place, right? So I think that's probably what we'll do, but don't know for sure. But that seems to make the most sense.